If I could name one analog horror series that's the most grounded in reality, it would be The Painter by Urbanspook. Ever since the first episode, Faces, I've been terrified by the grotesque art that this mysterious monster who terrorizes innocent people creates of their victims. But what if I told you that this entire time, there hasn't been just one monster? That there's more than one out there, searching for more and more victims, taking them out in worse and worse ways. I think it would be better for me to show you rather than tell you. Here's my first video on this topic if you want me to go more in depth on the first 5 episodes, although I will be giving you a brief recap here. Obviously this will spoil the entire series so far, so it'll be linked below for you to watch first if you haven't seen it. This is all extremely heavy stuff, so viewer discretion is advised. And yes, the 2 newest episodes are by far the most unnerving. Follow my social media link below, and I hope you enjoy this one. The 3rd of November 2022. That was the day that everything began with Faces. As the first video in the series, it perfectly establishes the premise of the story. Here we see the first few victims in this case: Carla Gray, Jackie Graham, James Miller, Daniel Williams, Lisa White, Jennifer White, Corey Beck, Margaret Beck, Tom Harris, and Jimmy, who as far as I can tell hasn't been identified yet. I say few, but this already tallies the victim count to 10, and we've only just started. Of course, there is one more photo titled Self-Portrait, and this is a face you'll be seeing in the next few episodes as well. Another interesting detail of this first episode is that the description reads, "I just started converting VHS tapes to digital and I found a bunch of tapes in the basement of my apartment complex. This was on one of them." Someone chronicled all of this in detail on VHS tapes, and yet they just ended up dumped in an apartment complex somewhere. It kind of makes me wonder exactly who made these tapes in the first place. The way that these are made seems weird for the police as well. Although we have this help number to call, the way these videos are edited seems to purposefully play these disturbing crimes up even more with music and sound effects added in, almost like someone is making a mockery of the whole case. That's probably just me overthinking though. The episode, The Lighthouse, shows the victims of the Collins family, a strange red image, and another image of the alleged perpetrator. Oddly enough, it's said that the Collins seem to be injected with amphetamines, which at higher doses can dull or completely numb pain. Odd. Based on this, we can increase the victim count to 15. Another common theme you'll notice as these episodes continue is the fact that several investigators involved in the case are being targeted, along with their loved ones. This obviously makes it even more difficult for the police to investigate, being that pretty much everyone involved is in danger. In the Walls doesn't show us any new victims, however it does add a few interesting details. For one, it shows the fate of Corey and Margaret Beck, something akin to some of the horrific human experiments committed during the Second World War. In addition, we're shown a house that the perpetrators stayed in, as well as another picture. As you can see, so far all of these are very similar, but things will change. The clue is aptly named, as it changes the course of this entire story with just 2 details. Before we see the painting of victim 16, Sean Kane, who was a private investigator working alongside police on this case, we see that in his final moments he managed to paint a number 2 on the door. What could 2 mean? The final image in this episode depicts what looks like a person wearing a mask of someone else's face. This is one of the 2. There's not just one perpetrator out there. The final episode for this catching up segment that you need to know about is Witness. In this episode, we're shown the victims Flora Rosenberg, Tina Rosenberg, and Jack Stryker. Flora is violated beyond recognition, Jack is nowhere to be found, and Tina, well, she is the witness. In her account at the end of the episode, we find that she was injected with something, and she also gives a description of the perpetrator, which culminates in this image. It's very odd that out of the 19 victims, 16 of which are confirmed deceased, and presumably the mysterious red painting also met a similar fate, although this isn't confirmed, Jack is the only one they know the name of and yet still haven't found. I've seen the theory that Jack is the other perpetrator, which could be possible, however the only evidence we have for this is that we don't know where he is. Now we get into the new episodes. I'll be censoring pigs a lot because, as you can see, it didn't get the best treatment by YouTube, so I gotta be careful. Either way, Pig starts with text saying yet another person involved with law enforcement, this time a former police officer called Ian Ford, has gone missing along with his wife May Ford. As the police investigated their farm property, they noticed an awful smell coming from their barn. I think we already know how bad this is going to be. By the way, the sound design in this episode is absolutely horrific. However, I'll let you find that out on your own because I think for some of you, just me talking about this is terrifying enough. Inside the barn, they found the remains of May Ford, her hands ripped from her arms at the wrist and still handcuffed to a pole. I can't even imagine how that's physically possible to generate that much force, but that is far from the worst of what they found. Her other mangled remains were gathered and tested, and it was found that she died from internal bleeding. Odd. You'd think it was external because of what happened to her hands, right? But there was something else discovered near her remains. A deceased horse who passed away from heart failure due to a sildenafil overdose. For those of you who don't know what sildenafil is, it's also known under the name Viagra. That should probably explain to you why May died from internal bleeding. If it doesn't, you probably don't need to be watching this. Maybe just watch my video on creepy video game areas or something. They also discovered a bloody mattress with bandages and boxes of penicillin, which, as a commenter called Some Random Guy pointed out, likely means that the perpetrator was injured severely by something, as penicillin can be used to avoid or control infection, and considering the bandages and the state of the mattress, that's the only thing that makes sense. The head of the Ford's granddaughter was also found in a blanket, increasing the victim count to 22. Several faces were also discovered hanging in the second stall of the barn. Remember that picture from The Clue? They're using the faces of past victims in order to conceal their identity. Two of the faces are definitely from the Collins family, however the other two I'm not as sure on. In addition to all of this, they found multiple headless pig carcasses and the body of an abnormally large pig that had the body of Ian Ford inside of it, but not only that, the pig's eyes were replaced with the eyes of Ian's own granddaughter. I'll let you take that in for a second because this is insane. Okay, let's keep going. Of course, when finding the other remains of the granddaughter, Fiona Ford, the police also found several disturbing paintings. Prepare yourself. We have Breeding Mount May, I Told You to Prepare Yourself, Wet Skin George, The Jigsaw Baby, Ian the Pig, Blowhole Isabelle, Hide and Zeke, Four Holes Fiona, Breathless Janice, Tina the Witness, and Observing Paul. Ian, May, Fiona, and Tina we're already familiar with, however the others are unknown, at least before I get into the next episode. Of course we know that Tina witnessed one of the perpetrators, however at this point she hasn't been discovered. I assume that she's deceased, but it could be possible that this painting was made in advance, as she could be in some type of witness protection considering she's the only witness the police have. Just a thought. As the commenter Some Random Guy points out, Wet Skin George has a very similar facial structure to one of the perpetrators. I'm unsure if that is him, but imagine if one of them was psychotic enough to remove their own face as to not only more easily wear the masks of their victims, but to avoid being detected. Then again, I assume infection would quickly take hold, especially considering their living conditions as we've seen. Abandoned cabins and barns aren't exactly the most sterile environments. As far as the other paintings, we'll explain those in the next entry. But before we get there, there was one more thing that the police discovered. A heavily damaged videotape outside of the barn. This is one of the perpetrators clearly wearing the mask of one of the victims. What they're saying is indecipherable, probably because of the conditions of the tape. Presumably this person is the one that commits the more brutal crimes of the two, as this comment by German Empire points out. By the way, if you've been counting, this video puts the victim count at 28. I really wish I didn't choose to write this script at 1 AM. Either way, let's go on to the next and final episode. Analog Horror Family is the current most recent episode of this series, and it's also pretty horrendous even compared to everything we've already talked about. Like I've said several times already, prepare yourselves. Several more gruesome reports have come in, one of which was about Isabelle Jackson, an elementary school teacher. Which, if you've been paying attention, that's another painting's victim identified. Strangely, despite calling 911 during the incident, she gave them the address of a completely different house, which just happened to possess 3 victims: Janice, Paul, and their son Zeke. I've seen people theorize that she may have been Zeke's teacher or have been coerced by the perpetrators in some way to give the wrong address. I honestly don't even know what to think when it comes to this part. The only other theory I could have is that she's somehow related to the other family and spends a lot of time at their house, so she got so panicked during the call that she just gave the wrong address. That seems a bit too much of a coincidence considering they just happened to have been attacked by the exact same perpetrators right around that time, but I thought I'd at least try my hand at adding to the theory. Either way, 3 more paintings have just been explained. Sadly enough, the aforementioned family was expecting a daughter in just a few months. Outside of the family home, they found some clearly used garden shears, and inside the scene was so horrendous that one of the officers had to take a leave of absence the next day. Both Janice and Paul's bodies were found in horrendous states, with Janice having her fetus removed from her stomach and the umbilical cord being used to end Janice's life. Terrifyingly enough, there are multiple real cases of pregnant women being found deceased with the fetus removed in a similar fashion. Just shows how rooted in reality this series really is. Paul was found tied to the kitchen counter just feet away with his mouth sewn shut. Paul was forced to observe what happened to Janice. Not only that, but the fetus was found in several pieces all over the house, broken apart similar to a jigsaw puzzle. That's another painting explained. Even worse than all of this, the head of the fetus was shoved down Paul's throat before his mouth was sewn shut. I can't imagine how much force that would have taken. This also means that Paul suffocated on his own unborn daughter. Listen, I know I told you it was going to keep getting worse, but I don't think anything would have prepared you for that. Zeke is still missing. A painting was found in the house with the only legible word on it reading pipes. I find it odd that there are currently 2 mysterious paintings, both of a strange red face that possess no title or almost no title. According to a comment by Out Utero, it may be possible that this is a reworking of the Man in the Pipes painting, meaning that they want the police to revisit the house of Sean Kane. Maybe they're purposely leaving clues at old locations to further throw the cops off of their trail. That makes 29 victims now though, as we don't know if this is supposed to be Kane. The police would eventually make it to Isabelle's address, however by that time it was far too late. The headless body of her husband Bruce was found near the open front door, a painting titled Infinite Mall Bruce laying in place of his head. Isabelle was found in the bathroom, the lock on the door being destroyed by a drill. The drill was also used on Isabelle, with the drill going straight through her frontal lobe. A note was found with the hole in her head, and it reads, "I live where I can't breathe and eat without teeth. What am I?" Well, with context clues, this is clearly a whale. We know this for a few reasons. For one, the painting associated with this victim is called Blowhole Isabelle, and on top of that, whales can't breathe underwater, therefore living where they can't breathe, and many whales, mainly in the baleen category, eat without teeth. Of course, as multiple comments have also pointed out, Isabelle is a larger woman, and obviously the term whale was used to disrespect her one more time after her death, showing how cold and remorseless these people are. At the scene, an extremely important clue was found. 2 sets of footprints. Clearly the boots are the one who's wearing the skin masks and the barefoot one is the painter themselves. Very odd that they wouldn't wear shoes at a crime scene though. It almost seems like they want to get caught. It would be interesting if the painter isn't complicit in the crimes, but being held hostage as well for some reason. I doubt it, but that would be a twist for sure. After this, the tape tells us they have 911 audio of Isabelle's call. This is really unnerving, and after some consideration, I've decided to include it, but I'll be putting a timestamp on screen so that you can just skip the entire call if you can't handle that. I'll summarize what you need to know afterwards, so don't worry about that. Alright, here's the timestamp and your final warning. For those of you that are still here, brace yourselves.
What's your emergency? Okay, now, what's the address?
They killed my husband.
Oh, okay, the police are on their way. Do you have somewhere to hide?
I locked myself in the bathroom.
Okay, good. Are you able, do you know they're there?
Yes, please.
Okay, ma'am, the police are on their way. I need you to stay calm for me, okay? What's your name?
Isabelle Jackson.
Okay, Isabelle, do you have anything to defend yourself with?
Oh my God, they're gonna get it.
The what? Isabelle, do Do you have anything to defend yourself with? Okay, listen, stay calm. Are there any windows in your bathroom? Isabel? Hello? Hello? Isabel?
Well, for everyone who sat through that, I hope you're still the same as before you heard it, but for those who chose to skip, let me give you a summary. The call begins with Isabelle freaking out, saying that someone has broken in and that they likely took the life of her husband, before saying something inaudible that, after looking at comments, I've also concluded was, "I don't want to die, I think I'm gonna be next." After typical 911 stuff like asking for her name and to remain calm, you can hear the sound of a drill get louder and louder as she begins to scream that they're about to break in. The 911 operator asks her if she has anything to defend herself with, as Isabelle continues to plead for help, saying that she doesn't want to die. As the 911 operator is asking Isabelle if the bathroom has any windows, likely to try and escape, we can hear her screams become blood-curdling as they become overpowered by the sound of the drill before silence. No heavy breathing, no laughing, nothing. After taking a human life with no effort, neither of the perpetrators make a sound, as if devoid of emotion. So yeah, that's what you missed out on for those of you who avoided it. I'm sure you're probably glad you did now. At this point we can conclude that there are two perpetrators, both of whom seem to take joy in taking the lives of anyone, including animals, for reasons unknown, possibly as part of some weird art form. We also know that for some reason, some of their victims were injected with amphetamines to purposefully allow them to feel no pain, possibly as a method to keep them alive longer as to torture them more, as amphetamines are also a stimulant? I'm not really sure though. It's also pretty clear that every single person's life is taken methodically, seeing as they're always pretty heavily ahead of police, even when someone was able to call 911 during an attack. I do believe that they want the police to be led to them, however I wonder if they specifically want to do so in order to take the lives of police, if that makes sense. Kind of like when animals will lure their prey. I'm very interested in how these people will be caught. Maybe the police will bait them as they know the officers seem to be targeted, or maybe if Tina is still alive, she's probably very well protected and monitored, meaning that they could also use her to lure them out. I'm sure a few months from now when I make another analysis video, we'll have a lot more figured out.